In this video, you will learn a surefire way to fail in sales and how not to fail.
Hello again. This is a follow-up video to the one that hopefully you've seen called The Key to Success. I want to start out by giving a definition to a sales call, because in the last video I mentioned make 15 calls on Monday and 25 on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 25 each, and then another 10 on Friday, something like that. 100 calls a week. When I say make 25 calls a day, that includes your repeat calls, your follow-up calls, or your service calls, or your calls where they don't answer or you leave a message. Those aren't calls. So let's define what your calls are. The initial call is what we're talking about when we're counting the 25 sales in a day. This is where you've called someone for the very first time. They're either a lead or whatever. You introduce yourself and you're asking for the opportunity to give them a quote. You're asking them for the information to quote. In other words, it's a qualifying call. The second type of call is going to be when you give a presentation. One big mistake some people make is they'll email the quote before they give a presentation, I guess, supposing that the client is going to close themselves. That's not going to happen. In fact, the opposite will happen. They're far more likely to see that big number and they're probably going to ghost you, okay? So what you do is you run the quote, you have it prepared to email, and then you give them a call and go over it with them on the phone and then say, now, I just emailed you what we just went over. I'd like for you to look over it for a few days. There's some better salespeople out there than I who are better closers, and some can even do one call closes. I don't do that. I want them to read it over, study it. I don't want them to feel pressured. I think the business stays on the books a lot longer like that. Plus they know it and understand it, and you don't have to resell them. Nothing more frustrating than to get someone to say yes, go through the application process, and then you have to resell them all over again from scratch. I don't actually include a follow-up call on my in my call log. So calls consist of the initial qualifying call. If I ask for the data and I get it, I put a check mark under that column that says qualified. If I do not get the data from them, I will put an NA or leave it blank or write the word no. So they do show up on my call log if it's an initial call, but I don't get the information. Same thing goes for the presentation. If I've gotten the data and I call them for the presentation and I don't give the presentation, I might put their name on the call log and put either no or check it off as yes. But you won't see me put the same person on there as giving multiple presentations to. Unfortunately, you do have to give a presentation to the same person more than once sometimes. And the same thing goes for the closing. So those are the only three types of calls that I include in my call log, are the qualifying call, the presentation call, and the closing call. When you make these sales calls, your objective should be to create a sales pipeline. Here's what I see a lot of people who are doing wrong is they will, once they find that person, they're making calls, and let's say they call 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. They find somebody that's interested. And quite frankly, a lot of these agents that I'm describing right now didn't make 10 calls. They've made 3, maybe 1 or 2. And they get someone that's interested and they get the data and they run a quote. And they're so excited to have a prospect that they forget about everybody else and focus on that one opportunity exclusively. And then they don't close right away. And then instead of making a bunch of other sales calls, they keep blowing that person's phone up, sending them email after email, worrying the stew out of them. And then when they get ghosted, they have the attitude that, oh, well, none of these leads are any good, or, this product's no good, this industry's no good, and they quit. Let me use a fish analogy for you to explain how ridiculous that seems. Imagine you went fishing, you put your hook in the water, you have your bait out, a fish comes along, nibbles on your bait, circles back around, might even nibble a little more, shows a lot of interest in your bait, but it starts to swim off. And instead of keeping your hook out there and bait out there for other fish, you crank up your boat and you go chase after that fish, and you chase that fish all over the Gulf of Mexico, all over the place. Keep throwing your bait in front of that fish. That fish keeps turning away, and finally it swims off and it's gone. You come to the attitude that, man, this bait's no good. Fish don't like this bait, or there's something wrong with all these fish, or I'm just not good at fishing. Well, that's probably true. That's about how ridiculous it is when you judge this industry off of one or two experiences, and especially if you don't create a sales pipeline. When you chase somebody down like that, you probably run them off to begin with. So they're responding to your sense of desperation, and you are desperate because you didn't create a sales pipeline. Let me share with you a better way, or the way it works in sales. Make your 25 calls, and during those calls, someone's going to give you the information to quote. You don't stop right then and there and go run the quote and call me, help me sell this. I finally got a hot one. Help me sell it. What you do is you gather that data and you make sure you take good notes and keep making sales calls. You run your quote, you prepare your presentation after your selling hours is what I call it, or calling hours. And then you call that person back either that next day or later that afternoon to make your presentation. My selling hours are basically 9 to 5. In reality, it's 9 to 4. And on Monday, I don't start till 10 a.m. And on Friday, I normally stop at noon. And I don't call usually between 11:30 and 1:30 because that's my lunch hour. So during those hours is when that's not many hours if you think about it. So you need to use that time to the best of your ability to be making these sales calls. You use the time outside of those hours during your lunch hour or after 4 or before 9 to run your quotes and plan and prepare. So if you do that and you've made 25 calls, and let's say out of those 25 calls, 10 give you the data, which is pretty fair possibility, or let's just say this 5 give you the data. If you were to stop when the first one gives you the data or the second one gives you, and you just spend 100% of your time, you will fail. This will not work for you. No sales job will. So what you do is you've planned your 5, and then you start calling them back for presentation. But while you're doing that, you're still making new initial sales calls. It's a numbers game. If you don't believe anything I ever tell you, believe this one thing. This will almost guarantee your success. When you wake up in the morning and you start to make calls, if you make it your top priority to get 4 new people to give you the data to quote every single day, that's more important than waking up and trying to find somebody to sell today. Because if you'll get 4 new people every single day, and that should be pretty easy, 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening or afternoon, then if you'll do that, you'll have people to give presentations to. And the more people you give presentations to, the sales will come, guaranteed. So when you wake up and you get the data, don't be disappointed you didn't make a sale. Be excited you got the data. Focus on that. Make that your top priority every day, is to find how many people you can get the data from to qualify. More qualified prospects means more sales. Prepare. If you were to decide you're going to start this job on Monday morning, on Saturday, you should make a list long before then, quite frankly. But at worst case scenario, Saturday, you should sit down and make you enough people to call so that as you're making and adding to them every afternoon when you finish up work and before 9, you should be coming up with new prospects. The next call might be a closing call, a follow. You're calling back now to close. You've tried to close and they didn't close, but you still see some possibility. And so you put it off to call them back in 2 weeks or 30 days. My rule of thumb usually is when I don't close somebody after making an effort to close, then I'll usually ask them, when should I call you back? And if I don't get a firm time, I usually call them back within 3 or 4 days that first time. And then each time I call them back, the time frame gets longer. The next time might be a week, the next time 2 weeks, next time 30 days, and then I might do that a couple times, then it's 90 days. And the reason why you want to be careful with that, if you call somebody back every day, or it is obvious to that person, you don't have very many prospects. And if you don't have very many prospects, they know, if they're in sales especially, if you don't have enough prospects that you seem dependent on that one person, you're not successful and you're desperate and your product must not be any good, or you're not any good. And I want to do business with people who are successful. So don't create that image. That's one of the worst things you can do. Let's also talk about email. I see so many people, they have call reluctance. They're scared to pick up. They're so afraid of rejection that they are just going to just keep sending out emails, hoping that email is going to sell them. That's a bad move too. Here's why. Because we get too many emails already as it is. And second of all, email will never make a sale for you. That email should be something useful to them that reminds them of you. But don't just keep sending emails. It might be okay to send a text every once in a blue moon, but usually by the time you send a text message that says, hey, just following up to take your temperature, and I do that. When you do that, you're at the end. That's usually your last resort. Here's another reason why you do not want to count on email. I called somebody yesterday, and actually you're going to get a twofer with this sales tip. The other sales tip is create some excitement. But here's a perfect example of why you don't want to rely on email, and why creating excitement and a sense of urgency will help you. So I gave this guy a quote a while back. I've called him several times. I guess he kind of sort of ghosted me maybe. So I had him down to call him back every 90 days. So I called him back this time and got him on the phone. And one of the things I noticed in my notes that I was making a mistake. In my notes, it says call early in the morning. And I realized that the last few times I tried to call him, I probably didn't look at those notes. And so I put him down to call. I didn't leave a message that time, so I called him the next morning. Hey, I just wanted to give you a call, and I want to apologize to you right up front if I'm being too persistent, but there's a reason why I believe you should have a sense of urgency and take some action right away, and don't put this off. And he goes, remind me what we're talking about? I'm the guy that gave you a health insurance quote a little while back, but something has drastically changed that prompted me to call you and suggest that you take action right away. Oh, what's that? Well, first let me ask, did you happen to get my newsletter, Your Health Matters, that I just sent out a couple of days ago? No, I don't recall seeing that. Now this goes back to the email. And so I said, oh really? And he started searching his email. And I said, I sent you a quote back a couple of months ago. And I don't recall seeing it. Make a long story short, he didn't get my email. He searched and searched and searched. And I said, check your spam folder. Maybe you unsubscribed or something. But that didn't explain why he didn't get my health insurance quote. So I asked him, send me an email and I'll reply to it. And I did. He still didn't get it. So maybe I accidentally got blacklisted. And I said, well, do you have another email? He goes, yes, send it to this one. So I sent it to a new email, and he got it. And I explained to him about inflation, and I explained to him how he could, and I said, by the way, the last time I quoted, you were paying $1,700 a month, I think it is, for you and your wife. And I gave you a quote for less than $1,200 a month. And here's the best thing. If you buy what I'm selling, you will lock in 2022 rates from now to your 65. If you keep your Blue Cross and Blue Shield policy, there's an extraordinarily high likelihood you're going to see a big jump up next year, maybe 40 or 50% increase, as Congress is predicting. When I called him, I gave him a sense of urgency, and it worked. He wants me to call him back now, I think Tuesday, hopefully, and take an application. That's going to be my closing call. The second thing is, I assumed that he looked at my quote, didn't like the numbers, or didn't like something he saw, and was ghosting me. The truth to the matter is, he didn't get the email, and I was calling at the wrong time. So don't assume. Always think positive. But don't blow people's phone up either. Call back in a reasonable amount of time. Never create the impression that prospect is the only prospect you got, even if it is, right? Keep those hooks in the water. Try to have a lot of fish nibbling at your bait, okay? So there you go. Hope this has helped. Have a great week. Well, month, year, career.